Welcome to this tactical analysis of the Wolverhampton Wanderers versus Arsenal game. If you enjoyed the video, please give it a thumbs up, it goes a really long way, and also consider sharing on social media and maybe subscribing. With that, let's get into the tactical analysis. So starting with Wolverhampton Wanderers, they built up in a 3-1 or a 3-2 deep, the variation being where Dendoncker started. So Neves would always be starting deep, but Dendoncker would sometimes start a little bit higher, kind of playing as almost 8s with Podence as well. That 3 at the back could sometimes also be a 2-3 as well. So instead of that 3-1, you could have a 2-3 where you have Saiss move to more of a left back rather than left centre back. With these build-ups, Wolverhampton were looking to try and get around the 4-1-4-1 or 4-3-3 press of Arsenal, which was particularly aggressive when the ball went out to those wide centre backs. Wolverhampton were looking to use the width that they have with their wing backs as well as also the movement of those number 8, so Dendoncker and Podence between the lines to be able to beat the Arsenal press and force them into retreating. They were also happy to switch the ball, play it long to those wing backs. Again, that forces Arsenal to retreat. Just mentioned we've got a 3-1 and 3-2. This is the 3-1 in midfield. The setup's a little bit weird here with Cody in this very odd position, but that's just because they've just taken a free kick here. But regardless, he's going to try and drop between them and make that back 3 again. You've got Neves as your holding centre defensive midfielder, and out wide at the moment you've got Dendoncker. When Wolves were set up in that 3-1, then you'd have Neves sit, but then Dendoncker would try and push up and he would try and sit kind of between the lines, looking to obviously help circulate possession, but then also get in the box for when Wolverhampton were able to get the ball out into those wide areas to be able to cross the ball. Out of possession, Arsenal tried to clog up those wide spaces, so we see that here with both Saka but also with Odegaard dropping. They're looking to try and just congest these wide spaces, make it difficult for the likes of Podence or Trincao to be able to make their runs from in to out, or the fullback of Wolves to be able to make an overlapping or an underlapping run versus the fullbacks of Arsenal. Also important for the Arsenal defence was Partey, who was constantly dropping both to clear or to header when Wolves were crossing the ball into the box. So here the ball goes back to Saiss and he spreads the play, trying to take advantage of Arsenal's narrowness in their 4-4-2 or 4-4-1-1. That 4-4-1-1 versus 4-4-2, the variation coming from Odegaard's position. He wants to try and put pressure onto Neves, the CDM, but he's dropping to try and help Partey and Xhaka plug those gaps. This switch of play to Semedo on this right-hand side was just a constant thing. They were constantly looking to try and switch the play, move Arsenal around, try and look for those gaps. With the ball played over to this side, Tierney is expected to try and put pressure onto the wing back, and then behind him trying to take advantage is Trincao, who's looking to make that run from in to out and take advantage of this huge space left in behind. But the Arsenal centre-backs, Gabriel as well as also White, were good at tracking those forwards, both when they looked to try and exploit the spaces behind the full-backs of Arsenal, but then also when the forwards looked to drop. These switches of play over to Wolverhampton's right-hand side were typically on, and when Wolverhampton countered, especially down their left-hand side through Podence, he was really happy to cut inside and be able to switch it across to the right-hand side with the wing-back as well as the forward on that side both being available. Anyway, the rest of this play just shows what I mentioned earlier with Arsenal's wide centre midfielders dropping deeper, helping to congest those wide spaces and try and nullify the width that the Wolverhampton back 5 with wing-backs gives them. Moving on to Wolverhampton Wanderers press, they pressed in a 5-1-1-3, Dendoncker being the more aggressive of the centre midfielders with Neves covering in behind. What they would try and do is, as the ball goes over to one of the fullbacks, you try and have the far side of the forwards. So for example, if the ball goes over to Suarez, the far side of the forwards for Wolverhampton Wanderers will be Trincao. He will try and come across and just try and put a little bit more pressure towards Partey, and then also he can try and press the far-sided centre-back for Arsenal, being in this case Gabriel, and just make it more difficult for Arsenal to be able to play out the back. To try and combat this, Arsenal would have those number 8s, so that being the actual number 8, Odegaard, as well as also Xhaka, drop from their higher positions between the lines and provide themselves as options for the Arsenal defenders to play the ball through them and alleviate the pressure. Unfortunately, in this situation, Gabriel, the man of the match, he plays a longer ball, looking to try and play over the Wolverhampton press, try and get the ball into the forwards of Arsenal, which both the defence of Arsenal as well as also the goalkeepers were looking to try and do. They wanted to try and isolate the wide midfielders or the wide forwards, Saka, Martinelli, versus hopefully the wide centre-backs of Wolverhampton, so Saiss and Kilman. On this occasion, Marcel is able to intercept, and then Wolverhampton are looking to try and counter-attack. So we see that with both the wing backs, they're looking to try and get up, as well as also the forwards are trying to get into attacking positions. The wing backs especially were really important during these transitions. They were looking to try and be as aggressive as possible, provide those overlapping runs and get Wolverhampton into those crossing positions. Of course, also force Arsenal into retreating too. And then after they force the retreat, then we see the same kind of build-up that we saw with the earlier example, with a 3-1 midfield base. Before we move on to the next example, note here Neves' position. This is something that he does both at this stage in the game, but then also after the red card too. He was constantly dropping to become almost a central centre-back and allow the wider centre-backs of Wolverhampton to be able to push out or split even more, and with that you also then have the wing backs of Wolverhampton push higher up the pitch too. Arsenal built up sometimes in a 4-1 deep with relatively flat back four, but then typically they built up in a 2-3-2-3. This progressed, typically keeping that kind of shape, the number 8s being Xhaka and Ødegaard obviously dropping, as shown in the example earlier, to try and help beat that 5-1-1-3 press of Wolverhampton. Sometimes it moved to a 2-3-3-2 where you have Lacazette drop and almost become, I guess, a number 10 or a third 8, and then you'd have the wide midfielders of Arsenal choose to either come narrow or stay relatively wide. The far-sided player will be able to come narrow and provide themselves as a more central option for a long ball. In this example, we see that 2-3-2-3 shape versus the 5-1 or 5-2-3 press of Wolverhampton. Again, we've got Partey as that CDM, with Xhaka not exactly in the number 8 position, but doing that role. You're going to have Ødegaard roughly here on the right-hand side. This is how Arsenal typically built up. You see, as mentioned, Ødegaard dropping to try and alleviate the pressure, help Arsenal force Wolverhampton back, but this is done under pressure from Dendoncker. On this occasion, Pedence Jimenez and Dendoncker are able to cajole Cedric Suarez to pass back towards the left-hand side. With this shape and the 5-2-3 or 5-1-1-3 press behind it, the wing back near side will typically be tracking the forward. It almost looks like a back four with that wing back pushing up almost into a wide midfield position. And then far side now, Trincao has dropped into a right midfield position just to keep a little bit more of balance rather than be higher up, as mentioned he could be. Anyway, as Arsenal try and switch the play, which they were prone to do, just try and get Neves and Dendoncker to cover across. Those two were covering from one channel to the other, trying to help their wing backs versus Arsenal's wide midfielders, and the fact that Arsenal's fullbacks want to overlap as well. So those two centre midfielders for Wolverhampton were doing a lot of defensive duties. Trincao puts pressure on that right hand side, but he's passed around by Arsenal's little triangle, with Xhaka able to help Tierney escape on that left hand side, and then he's going to go and support Martinelli both positionally and potentially with a run. That was also a good example of Lacazette dropping, providing himself as a shorter option between the lines to try and cause a little bit of confusion for those Wolverhampton centre-backs, but also, again, provide an option. Other than Arsenal's 2-3-2-3 build-up, with aggressive or driving runs by their wide midfielders, overlapping fullbacks, getting crosses in, and those number 8s helping to overload those wide areas, Arsenal were also looking to try a 4-3-3 or 4-1-4-1 press, which we showed versus Wolverhampton's 3-1 or 2-3 deep build-up. Typically, the intensity of the press stepping up when the wide centre-back for Wolverhampton received the ball. To add to this, Arsenal also had their corners as well as their long throws. Those corners, at least in the first half, typically aimed at the near post. Those set pieces became a little bit of a nuisance for Wolverhampton in the second half, where Arsenal looked to use every goal kick, throw in, free kick as a means of time waste. I think this is a pretty good example of the 4-1-4-1 press and Wolverhampton building up in that 3-2 shape. So we've got the Wolverhampton 3 centre-backs, we've got our 2 midfielders, we've got one of our wing-backs before he goes off, and we've got Arsenal in their 4-1-4-1 press, looking to try and put pressure here with Saka versus both the wing-back and the wide centre-back. However, between the lines, the most dangerous player for Wolverhampton Wanderers, Pedence, is constantly looking to try and provide himself an option, and here Saiss is able to pick him out. And with that, as mentioned, you've got Dendoncker looking to try and get into that space between the lines, and then there's just a ton of space for those wing backs of Wolverhampton, and especially with the likes of Podence on the ball, you've got that switch on, which forces Arsenal into retreating. As I mentioned earlier in the video, these positions were something that you would expect to repeat quite a few times, and we see that here. We've got Semedo receiving the ball from the switch, we've got Neves following up, providing a short option for him, and then we've got an in to out run by Trincao, as well as also Dendoncker and Podence in that central space, almost just number 8, with Dendoncker looking to try and be relatively aggressively positioned. Okay, so moving on to Wolverhampton Wanderers in the second half, I don't think too much changed initially before the red card. So still 3-2 deep build-up or 2-3 deep build-up, moving into a 3-2-5, having that width with your wing backs, the ability to switch the ball, dangerous runs by Podence, with him looking to also float across from that left-hand side to the right-hand side and help overload that wing. Got Wolverhampton looking to try and cross or play early through balls on occasion for Jimenez. Jimenez sometimes looking to pull out towards that left-hand side, but after the red card they moved to a more aggressive 3-1-6 with even more emphasis on crossing or cutbacks, utilizing movements and combinations by the wing-backs, wide midfielders and forwards, all in those wide spaces to try and use their man advantage against Arsenal in those wide spaces. Obviously, this was against Arsenal in their 5-3-1, so Arsenal packed out the box, and I wouldn't say they were happy to allow the crosses to come in, but they had the numbers centrally to be able to defend it. And considering they were time wasting and counter-attacking through Smith Rowe or Nketiah, Arsenal weren't really committing too many numbers to allow Wolverhampton space to really exploit on a counter or the like. Here in the 55th minute, we've got an example of Arsenal set up in that 2-3 shape again, with Wolverhampton looking to try and press them towards the touchline, and they're able to force an error out of Suarez, and Wolverhampton are able to counter. With the counter, you see the wing backs as well as also the forwards, gambling forwards, really countering with pace. This forces a retreat out of Arsenal. Unfortunately, Podence's pass for Marcel is a little bit short, and Suarez is able to make up for his earlier error. But this is a really good example of just how aggressive the wing backs for Wolverhampton were trying to be during these counterattacks. And with that, the final thing is just showing an example of that 3-1-6 build-up by Wolverhampton. I think the key thing really to note is just how many players they had up against the back line of Arsenal, and how they were looking to try and constantly have players running from in to out into those wide spaces and try and drag Arsenal centre backs and wing backs into those positions. As mentioned, Arsenal moved to a 5-3-1 at this point, so you had Xhaka, Partey and Smith Rowe as your 3-man midfield, and then a back 5 with Rock Holding as one of your centre backs, and all the Wolverhampton crosses were just constantly being deflected by that unit. With as many forwards as Wolverhampton Wanderers had in those aggressive positions, it did mean that they could still pull Arsenal centre-backs out into these wide spaces. But of course, with Arsenal moving to that 5-3-1 and the defensive mindedness of Partey, it allowed them to be able to, as Gabriel has done here, track those forwards in the wide spaces, track potential other runners, other attackers for Wolverhampton Wanderers in those dangerous positions. And Wolverhampton weren't really able to create any clear-cut chances. There were 1 or 2 opportunities where Chiquinho or Fabio Silva were able to get into this right-hand side space, but poor decision making or just being a little bit unlucky meant they weren't able to get anything out of those positions. And with that, we've covered the main points. Please have a look in the description or the comments down below for the full tactical summary. And with that, if you enjoyed the video, please give it a thumbs up. It goes a really long way, and we're out.